I'd like to give you an overview of sales in 2025. To get started, let's look at the sales for Germany, France, and Tokyo. As you can see on the graph, France peaked in Q2, whereas Tokyo peaked in Q4. Now I'd like to turn to the dips in Tokyo for Q1 and 2. This leads me to my next point. On the one hand, sales decreased in France in Q3. However, they increased in Tokyo. In a nutshell, we can learn from our international branches' success stories. Welcome to English with Fiona. Let's have a look at breaking this down so that you can see simply how to structure your presentation. First of all, we looked at introducing the topic. So the purpose of today's presentation is I'd like to give you an overview of sales in 2025. Next up, we would look at starting the point. So to get started, let's look at sales over 4 quarters. My first point covers the difference or discrepancies in the sales in the 4 quarters. You're moving on to another topic. You could say, now I'd like to turn to, or this leads me to my next point. So we use this for the flow in our presentation. You can use it repeatedly each time you change topics. You have visuals up on a screen, a PowerPoint presentation, or perhaps you are sharing it on Teams. So to refer to the visuals, we can say, as you can see on the graph, or this graph illustrates. And then people are going to look at your visuals. When we get to the end of our presentation, we want to summarize the points that we've talked about. So we could either say to recap the main points, or let's briefly go over the key findings. And in conclusion, or concluding, in a nutshell, this means to bring everything down into a small, brief summary, in a nutshell. Or I'd like to leave you with this final thought. So as you heard in the beginning, we discussed this graph. I presented it to you in a very brief way, but to use the key phrases that we needed to present our talk, to introduce it, to start it, to move on to different points. Provided a contrast where I talked about sales in Q2 versus Q4, and a summary and a conclusion. So let's have a look now. When we're describing our graph and the trends, whether it's going up or down, increasing or decreasing, let's look at some more advanced vocabulary that we can use. So to soar or to rocket, it's an upward trend. It means to go up, increase very fast. But some better words, to soar or rocket. For downward trends, we could use plummet or plunge. Both mean to go down very fast. Or we could talk about something that is leveling off, has leveled off. To surge or to jump, also a sudden change in our graph. The opposite, downward, to slump or tumble. And then with something more stable, to plateau, to stay at a high level. We have rise and grow, which we can use instead of increase, and fall and decline, which we can use instead of decrease. Fluctuate, if there are lots of changes in our graph that we want to talk about. Now we could talk about fuel prices fluctuating, oil prices fluctuating, something that goes up and down quite often. When something reaches a peak, it gets to the top point, hits a low point. It's down at the bottom, the opposite of peak. Or remains stable, like a plateau or leveling off, remain stable. We could say prices have remained stable for the last 2 quarters. So an important part now with describing our graph and the changes in it is that we want to describe the speed or size of the change. And to do this, we need to introduce our adverbs, or adjectives. So, significant or dramatic or sharp. This is a large noticeable change. So if we want to say that prices rose, we could say prices rose sharply. We could say profits fell dramatically. The opposite, fell, is to decrease. Something that's steady or gradual. So, for example, we could say usage grew steadily, or prices grew steadily. If we use the word slight or marginal to talk about a very small change, so now the change, it's not dramatic, it's not steady or gradual, it's just slight, marginal. There was a slight dip in profit in November. And lastly, here we have consistent or constant. Sales have remained constant for 3 months. So, unchanging. Sales have remained constant for 3 months. Let's have a look at our graph again and see how we could describe it using these words. So, for example, if we have a look at Germany in blue, we can say there is a consistent increase in sales over quarter 2, 3, and 4. For quarter 2 in France, there was a dramatic decrease or dramatic drop between quarter 2 and quarter 3. Sales have risen sharply between quarter 3 and quarter 4 for Tokyo. So if we want to show a contrast between different branches, different countries, or different units, we could use words like this, conversely. So, for example, sales have risen in Tokyo. Conversely, they have dropped dramatically in Berlin or Germany. On the one hand, we could talk about the sales in France have soared, but on the other hand, the contrast, sales in Germany have fallen. Despite this, we could also use to show a contrast, despite inflation increasing in Germany, sales have risen steadily. In addition, we could also say moreover or furthermore to give us other vocabulary to describe something extra. If we want to show a result of that, we could use the words consequently, or as a result, or therefore. And instead of saying for example all the time, we could say for instance, or to illustrate this point, or take the case of. Take the case of France in quarter 3. So let's just listen to our beginning dialogue again so that you can hear how the words all came together. I'd like to give you an overview of sales in 2025. To get started, let's look at the sales for Germany, France, and Tokyo. As you can see on the graph, France peaked in quarter 2, whereas Tokyo peaked in quarter 4. Now I'd like to turn to the dips in Tokyo for quarter 1 and 2. This leads me to my next point. On the one hand, sales decreased in France in quarter 3. However, they increased in Tokyo. In a nutshell, we can learn from our international branches' success stories. Thank you. I hope this has been very useful for you. Let me know in the comments which ones are new for you and which ones you will use in your next presentation.